So this is the pre-test for Unit 2, and the first section we're going to look at is solving equations. Now a lot of these questions actually you have to do some simplifying before we can solve. So things like this where we're subtracting a negative, we should know that that's the same as actually adding. So I can go ahead and say this is the same as 2d plus 4 equals 8. Now when it comes to solving an equation, remember we want to do opposites, so we want to collect like terms. So I got numbers on both sides, so if I bring my numbers to the other side, then I can collect them. Now to do that I've got to do the inverse, and positive 4 take away 4 is 0, and if I work out 8 take away 4, that gives me 4. Now I still have the 2d left on this side. Now remember in algebra when two things are next to each other, that means that you're multiplying. So instead of multiplying by 2, if I divide both sides by 2, then I get left with just d, and 4 over 2 is just 2. So in other words, the answer to the first question is d equals 2. Now for my second question, I've got one variable and I've got two numbers. So I want to try and collect my numbers together, but I want to collect them on opposite sides to my variable. So I'm going to bring this positive 6 to the other side. So to do that, I'm going to do the inverse again. So 6 take away 6 cancels, that's why I do this. And then negative 9 take away 6 is negative 15. And I still have negative 3t left on this side. Now we're going to divide both sides by negative 3, because if they're next to each other, that means I'm multiplying, and I need to do the inverse. And negative 15 divided by negative 3 is 5, and negative 3's will cancel on this side, so 5 equals t. Or if I switch it around using my symmetric rule, then I can say that t equals 5. Also, don't forget, you can actually go back and check your answers as well to make sure that this is actually true by substituting. So if I plug 5 in for t up here, I've got negative 3 times 5 plus 6, and if I check that I get negative 9, which is good because that's what I have on this side of the equation as well. Therefore I know that I definitely have this question right. I could do the same with this as well. I could say 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 take away negative 4 is 8, and as I have 8, then I also know this is correct as well. So when it comes to the test, if you go back and substitute in, you'll know if you've got the answer correct or not. If you have a sentence that doesn't make sense, something like 8 equals 10, then you probably made a mistake, and you can go back and see if you can find your error. Now the third question is very similar to the first one in the fact that we have two negatives here. So I'm going to rewrite this straight away as plus. And I have a similar issue to question 2. I got numbers on both sides, and I just got variables on the right. So I'd like variables on the right, numbers on the left. So I'm going to subtract 8 from this side. Now, a lot of people on the quizzes will put in plus 8 here. Now, it's not plus 8 because 8 plus 8 is 16, and that wouldn't actually cancel. So it has to be negative 8. The other reason is 8 is positive 8, so I want to do the opposite of that as well. So that's going to cancel. 14 take away 8 gives me 6, equals 2k. Notice I dropped the positive at this point. As it's positive 2k, I can just simply say 2k. If this had been subtracted, then I would have made this negative 2k. Divide both sides by 2. That will cancel. And k equals 6 over 2, which is 3. And then, of course, I can switch it back again using my symmetric property. So the answer is k equals 3. You can check by substitution, but that one is definitely the right answer. Now, ones with fractions do seem to be causing a lot of problems, particularly like the ones on question 4. So, a lot of people are multiplying by negative 3 straight away. First of all, though, we've got to collect our number terms together. So, we're going to leave the variable alone. So, we're going to do the opposite, taking away 7 first, which is to add 7. So, that cancels. And then negative 2 plus 7 is positive 5. Now I can do the opposite, dividing by negative 3, which is to times by negative 3 on both sides. That will cancel because it's an inverse. And 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. So remember what the line on the fraction actually means. It means divide, so you're going to do the opposite, which is multiply. Okay, now we move on to our proportions questions. I know this is a proportion because I can see a fraction on both sides of here. I can also see the two negatives here as well. So I know that I can simplify this and put plus instead. So that'll be my first step. And then what we're actually doing here is, instead of dividing by 8, I'm going to times both sides by 8. And when I do that on the left-hand side, of course the 8's cancel. But I also want to get rid of the divide by 3 as well, so I'm going to times both sides by 3. Now I'm going to add parentheses in at this point because I want to times all of this expression by 3, not just the 5n. And notice the 3's cancel as well there. So effectively what happened here is I actually cross-multiplied. So I did 8 times 2, which you can see here, or 2 times 8 using the commutative rule, and 3 times 5n plus 2, and I got my 3 times 5n plus 2. Now I can go ahead and start distributing here. So 3 times 5n is 15n, and 3 times 2 is 6, and 2 times 8 is 16. Now if I subtract 6 from both sides, I'm going to end up with 10, and then final step, divide both sides by 15, and leave it as a fraction rather than the decimal. But notice both of these divide by 5 as well, so 5's into 10 goes twice, and 5's into 15 goes 3 times. For question 6, if it helps, you can make it into a proportion by putting divided by 1. And when you cross multiply and times by 1 doesn't actually do anything. With it just being one side, all we really need to do is just do the opposite of divided by -2, which is to times both sides by -2. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to end up with positive 36. And on the right-hand side, I'm just going to end up with this 9 take away -a, which is the same as 9 plus a. Subtract 9 from both sides, because 9 take away 9 is 0, and 36 take away 9 is 27, and that equals my variable a, so I'm actually finished. Now we move on to questions where we've got variables on both sides and also numbers on both sides. Now we can collect on either side for variables, but I normally prefer to do this on the left-hand side, so my answer starts with letter equals something. So I'm going to do the opposite of subtracting 2m, which is to add 2m to both sides. When I work this out, I end up with 6m. And on this side, that cancels, and that was the whole point of doing this. Now, to move my numbers to the same side, I'm going to do the opposite as well. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. -8 plus 8 is 0, that's why I do this. And 10 plus 8 is 18. And last step, if we divide both sides by 6, 18 divided by 6 gives me 3. Now on this question here, I can try adding 4r to both sides. So I can bring all my letters to one side. So this cancels. But notice this also cancels. -4r plus 4r is also 0. So actually this cancels out. So I got 5 equals 5. Now that's obviously identical. They're exactly the same. And the reason I'm using the word identical is to remind you that what we're going to put for our answer is identity. And you can see that it starts with the same few letters. So when we get something that's the same on the left and the right in terms of solving equations, we're going to put it's an identity. Now when we did properties earlier, this was called the reflexive property, so it is a little confusing. We used identity as something different, so just make sure you're aware of that. Now there is another answer we can put. If we get exactly the same answer, we can also put all real numbers. And what that means is you can substitute any number you like into this original equation and you should get the same answer. Now if I started with 0 here, anything times 0 is obviously 0. Plus 5 is 5, and 5 take away 0 is 5. So you can see that 0 works for this question. If I was to plug in 1 into here, -4 times 1 is -4, plus 5 is 1, and 5 take away 4 times 1 is also 1. And actually you could try that for any number in the world and that would also work, and that's because these two things are identical. So obviously the left hand side is going to equal the right hand side. And I'm going to pause the video after the 8th question.